So you're just going to ask me questions about the conference?
Yeah, but it's a far-reaching conversation, so just relax. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys.
So you're just going to ask me questions about the conference?
You'll be getting started. Yeah, but it's a. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, friends and enemies, welcome. This is We Act Real, broadcasting live on the radical side of Martin King Avenue, the Untitled Nation's capital, the foothill to Cedar Hill, and Frederick Douglass home, Washington, D.C. And we're here to talk about some restorative justice. But before we get started, we have to acknowledge the passing of a great local journalist, Bruce Johnson. He was a towering figure in Washington, D.C. He succumbed to his battle with cancer, and we just want to wish him and his family our condolences and hope he travels well, and want to thank him for a job well done. And he was always supportive and made time for the young people, not only through his activism and his work, but also colleagues such as myself who looked up to him. So again, rest in peace to Brother Bruce Johnson. I want to dedicate this program to him. And as I just mentioned, we're talking about restorative justice and practices today. The Institute for Restorative Justice and Practice has a virtual conference manifesting our healing and living beyond COVID-19. They're offering you to join them for a virtual platform that brings caregivers, students, educators, service providers, community leaders, policymakers, and restorative practices experts together to explore, discuss, and engage in a multidimensional dialogue through a trauma-informed lens of the impact of COVID-19. This is taking place Friday, April the 8th, 2022 at 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And you can register for that, and we hope that you do so. And here to talk more about this illustrious program that's coming up is Dr. Matasha Harris, who is an associate professor of criminal justice in the Department of Behavioral Sciences and Human Services at Bowie State University. That's a HBCU. She received her Ph.D. in criminal justice with a specialization in public policy and a master of philosophy in criminal justice from the Graduate Center, University of New York. And she received her Master of Arts in applied sociology and a Bachelor of Arts in criminal justice from Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. Welcome to We Act Real, Dr. Matasha Harris.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so tell us what we need to know and how people can be a part of this illustrious virtual conference that's taking place this Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Yes, so we will have our second annual Restorative Justice and Practices Conference. This is a virtual conference that's open to the public, and it's also free. So it's an opportunity for community members, educators, faith-based community to come and share with us and learn about ways in which we can address trauma and the impact of COVID-19 on our communities. And so with this particular training, individuals who need continuing education units, they can also receive those credits as well. And so we will provide several sessions and energy experiences throughout the day on Friday for individuals who just come and learn and also take away important ways in which they can heal themselves and also the individuals around them in the community.
Well, it's often been said that hurt people hurt people. How does restorative justice address the pain and the healing of that conundrum?
So with restorative justice and practices, at the heart of this particular social science is healing. So we focus on healing and addressing unresolved trauma. So that's one important aspect of restorative practice, is to understand that people have been traumatized in various ways. And in order for us to move forward, we have to address the trauma that individuals have experienced. So even in terms of individuals who are incarcerated, the fact that they need restoration as well. And so it's just a multi-level in terms of addressing various groups and in terms of ways in which we can move forward and heal as a community.
But one of the things that got me excited about talking to you about this program is that when I look at the list of participants from the speakers and the facilitators, I see a unique combination of educators and artists, as well as policymakers and politicians. We want to talk about some of the people that's going to be joining this conference, April the 8th, Friday, April the 8th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Bowie State University, a virtual conference.
Yes, so we were very intentional in bringing in different individuals. For example, the artist And so we have a drumming experience, we have energy experiences throughout the program, and we have community leaders, Dr. Ivy Hilton, Dr. Salim Hilton, they are on our program. We also have a few politicians on our program as well. U.S. Congressman Steny Hoyer, who actually sponsored one of our budget projects for the Institute of Restorative Justice, in which we received funding. We also have the Honorable Jazz Lewis there. In addition, we have a community, individuals from the faith-based community. We have Reverend Tony Lee from the Community of Hope. And so what we tried to do was bring in a nice mixture of individuals, not only practitioners and academics, but also people from the community, so that we can see that the work that we do, we're all connected together. And so we thought that it was very important to bring in various individuals and agencies to show the depth and the wealth of the knowledge that we have that can be beneficial to everyone in the community.
Can you provide a clear definition of what restorative justice is, and quite possibly, therefore, what it looks like to the uninformed?
Yeah, so in terms of restorative justice, which is a subset of restorative practices, basically it acknowledges that a harm has been done, particularly a crime. And so in order for us to move past the crime that has occurred, that is important to bring not only the offender, but also the victim and the community together to address this harm that has occurred. And so in reference to restorative justice, we want to restore the individual, we want to restore the victim, and we also want to restore the community. So it brings all of these entities together to try to move forward with the harm that it has occurred. So again, it focuses on harm, it focuses on healing, and also restoration of not only the individual who engaged in the criminal act, but also the community and the victim as well.
Well, what do you say to people who try to trivialize someone's trauma or pain or suffering and say, well, just get over it, you can get past it? What do you say to them in terms of the significance of actually addressing restorative justice?
So it's not that easy for people just to get over it. There are some issues that people have to work through. And I think particularly oftentimes in our community, the Black community, there's a negativity associated with individuals seeking help. However, it is important that we address the pain that individuals are experiencing in order for them to receive the type of therapy, we can say therapy, whether in informal or formal ways, to move past that. So I think it is very important for us to address those issues, that trauma, in order for individuals to move forward.
Well, you know, I self-identify as an angry Black man in therapy to signify that we all have something to work on, something to work through, something to get past, and that healing is a process. It's a process. You know, we was talking about off camera about the slap that was heard around the world. Well, Jada clearly was triggered because a lot of Black women are triggered about hair. You know, because of whether it's the westernized ideology of beauty that has been physically, politically imposed upon them. We just had the Crown Act passed, that's a few weeks ago, that up until that time, it was legally possible for a woman to be oppressed in a professional setting because of her hair, most often her natural hair. Will was triggered because in his book, his mother, he had the unpleasant experience of witnessing his mother been brutalized by his father, and he felt that he should have protected her, and he failed to do so. That's why you heard in his apology, you know, protection, and those were triggers. And so I think what your restorative justice is actually bringing to bear is these issues that we're all walking around with. Because when we hear about road rage and someone, you know, shoots a guy because they cut him off or whatever, it really wasn't about that incident. Clearly, there was something going on with this guy well before then. We've heard the stories, you stepping on the wrong person's shoe. Clearly, it was not about your shoe. It's something that was going on with that individual long before that. So I think that is just how significant your work is doing in addressing these issues, not only with the individual, but in our community collectively. So how do you see this planning out in terms of being effective in addressing some of these triggers that so many of our people in our communities, hurt people are walking around with?
Well, that's an excellent point, because with addressing those triggers, we're going to identify those triggers and also give individuals ways in which to address those triggers when it happens, because we are triggered in various ways. And by no means am I a psychologist or a counselor. However, we will have people there, experts in terms of mental health, counseling, and psychologists to actually help us deal and work through this. And so with the healing, and for example, on the education side, we have restorative justice and practices experts who will tell teachers or explain to teachers and parents in the community ways in which and how it looks in the actual education setting. So individuals will leave with concrete ways in which they can address triggers for themselves, triggers within the school system, and for administrators and teachers to address the triggers that students may experience while in that particular educational setting. And so again, we will give valid ways in healing exercises and tips that individuals can use to address those triggers that they have.
Well, I've been told, I don't have any facts to back this up, but I've been told, it's my impression, it's my understanding, as even I would go as far to say my belief, that during the pandemic, a lot of people was going, bat crazy, or, what they call cabin fever. I think divorce rates went up. I think we had situations, and I do think this is backed with facts, that issues of domestic violence rose in those settings. Those are negative outcomes of the pandemic. But what ways do you think the pandemic has changed things?
Well, in terms of changing,
in terms of what we're addressing here, of course.
So in terms of changes, I know that for the family, for some individuals who were fortunate enough to work at home, the parent was in the home more with the children during the virtual schooling process, and that could have had positive or negative impact, being that the parent was there in the home to see and express the challenges that some teachers face. But it did bring people back into the home during a period where oftentimes, for example, mothers might be out working, but people were actually in the home. For the domestic violence side, yes, domestic violence did increase. We know that with the pandemic that a lot of individuals lost their jobs, and income is a main factor in terms of domestic violence and how individuals experience domestic violence. And so removing that income from the family created a lot of stress and strain to families who were already experiencing domestic violence. So it showed up in various ways in homes during the pandemic. And so again, with this conference, we are going to provide ways to address that trauma and identify it, to say, okay, this has happened. Now, what can we do to move forward past the pandemic?
So in essence, if there was dysfunction in the home, it increased the dysfunctionality at home. And of course, there's a famous quote that said, when poverty knocks on the door, love goes out the window. So if there was already a check-to-check situation, then that created even more problems in that household, and that's something that probably has yet to be addressed. I think the new pandemic perhaps is that lingering economic effect, perhaps even increased depression. But in the good case scenario is when that family no longer has to fight through traffic to get the kids to school or daycare, and then get to their job and get back. They can work from home, and they take a lot of stress off of them. And I think they might have been even liberated. All this time I could have been working from home, because that's why it's a real resistance to get back to that. That's what downtown and across America is suffering, because it changed the economic structure of society in terms.
That is so true. I commute.
Yeah. You commute. So I feel your pain. All right. Yeah. So let's look at some of the things that's on the schedule. Can you share some of the things that's going to be happening during the course of the day, and what people can look forward to? And again, don't hesitate to share the information on how people can join and be a part of all of this.
Okay, so we're going to start with morning vibrations. We're going to have a nice drumming session to set off the tone for our event. And then, of course, we'll have the opening remarks, and we will have breakout sessions where individuals can choose which session they would like to attend. So we have breakout sessions in reference to pre-K through higher education for those who are interested in that particular track. We also have a research track that's based on the pandemic and also restorative justice to see how that looks in terms of the research that has been disseminated in reference to this area. We also have a track for community engagement, so that community piece to see for individuals who are interested in how they can incorporate restorative justice and practices into their organizations. Also, we have a healing engagement where we will have particular healing sessions. For example, we have sound sessions and ways in which we can incorporate healing and tips in which individuals can use in their daily lives. And we also have a restorative justice session. So we have breakout sessions in the morning. We will also have a panel discussion during the afternoon where we will have the Honorable Aisha Braveboy, Honorable Jazz Lewis on that panel as well, Reverend Tony Lee, and some other individuals where we'll have an opportunity to hear from politicians, also a mental health counselor a mental health professor from Bowie State, and other individuals who are engaged in restorative justice and practices work. So we will have that panel. And we will also have an afternoon session as well with the same tracks in terms of pre-K education, research, community engagement, healing, and also restorative justice. In addition to that, we have 2 keynote speakers. We have a morning keynote speaker, and that will be Dr. Ivy Hilton. And then in the afternoon, we have Dr. Gregory Stanislaw out of New York, who will provide the keynote during the afternoon. And so individuals can sign up for our conference. And if I can provide the email, I can provide that later in reference to how they can actually sign up for or register for the conference that's upcoming this upcoming Friday.
I'm going to read a quote that I want to share, but if you can put it in the chat while I'm doing so, I can go make sure I support it and repeat it a few times, and also, of course, share it with the posting of this video. We're live on YouTube now, and then it will be distributed across our social media platforms shortly thereafter. This is a quote from Milton Friedman. He's not, he's not a supporter of progressive politics whatsoever, but even a broke clock is right 2 times a day. And I think he really speaks to where we are in this moment in history. He goes on to say that only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are laying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. I think restorative justice, not only addressing the unique experience of Black people in America and throughout the African diaspora, but just people getting through life in a very unrestrained capitalistic society. These issues have to be brought to bear. What do you think is the most important aspect of restorative justice, whether it's on your personal opinion on you as an individual, or what you hope to have impact on our collective community?
A great question. One of the things for me, my background is in terms of restorative justice, and also individuals or formerly incarcerated individuals. That's where my passion lies. And so with restorative justice, it acknowledges again that a wrong has occurred. However, people are worthy of being restored. People are worthy of other opportunities. And so with this, restorative justice provides an opportunity for our community when an individual comes home per se, to embrace them and not to say that we forget what has been done, but we acknowledge that we need to move forward. We need to move forward. And I think with restorative justice, it basically allows people to see that they are worthy and that we need to invest in not only individuals, but in our community. And so with restorative justice, it's very intentional in bringing the community back together, and also the individuals and other people who have been harmed. And so for me, that restorative piece is very critical in terms of healing and moving forward as a community.
I think you raise a very excellent point there, because this country has the largest prison system in the entire world. And the vast majority of those prisoners will be returning to society. And so unless we create a mechanism that does embrace restorative justice, that does offer a pathway forward, then we're not doing what we need to do, because this whole throw away the key and lock them up that's not obviously the answer for what we're dealing with. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, and that's an important issue for you, because it reminds me of the film Shawshank Redemption. We kept seeing Morgan Freeman's character go up for parole over and over, and his trials of going through that process, and how, well, how much, when is enough enough? You know what I'm saying? At what point, they could have released him after 20 years, but I think he ended up doing 40. And we still have people wasting away in prison for something they did when they was 19. A good friend of mine, Scotty Beats, was a great music producer in Washington, D.C. He produced with he produced Beyonce. Let's say that there's a whole litany of names, but let me start there. But he was killed, unfortunately, after he came home from his honeymoon, and someone was attempting to steal his wife's car out of his driveway. And I wish he had let them steal the car out of his driveway, but he challenged them and he was killed in the process. Now, at his funeral, one of the saddest funerals I've ever been to, because he's one of those great guys. You know how they always say someone is wonderful and nice when they're gone, but literally, I never heard him say one cross word about another human being. He was just that kind of guy. And at his funeral, his parents spoke about restorative justice, because they said, at the funeral, everyone's eyes full of tears, and they had the strength and the fortitude to acknowledge that there was 2 lives lost the night their son lost his life. They lost the son, and the young man that took his life is in prison for the rest of his life, or the majority of his life. And they reached out and said they was going to be a part of this young man's life to understand what he did, why he did it, and they was going to stay in touch with him to make sure that they do what they can to break this chain, break the cycle, and talk about restorative justice, and that they forgave him, and that the young man had apologized and had remorse. And I thought there was a lot of courage on their parents' part, going through pain themselves, to talk about restorative justice in that moment. That was like the first time I saw it in practice, in a real life situation. And so what you bring to the table is, before someone has to go through that type of pain, we can deal with these things now in hopes of preventing other acts of unfortunate acts as a result of those who don't get the restorative. I don't want to say that we're preventing crime, but we can prevent acts of violence that leads to crime. Yes, if we deal with those issues first.
That's true.
How do you feel about that in terms of the work you're doing with this wonderful conference taking place April the 8th from 4 to 8 p.m. at Bowie State University?
So I think that's very important. So with the restorative justice and the excellent example that you provided, it brings in, so for example, the family members who were considered to be the victims, and bringing them together with the actual person who engaged in that wrongful act to see ways in which they can help to move forward. And so with restorative justice, although restorative justice looks at it from a reactive standpoint, on the other hand, in terms of the other practices, restorative practices, they are preventative. So for example, the practices that are occurring within the educational school system, the school systems, in reference to conflict mediation and addressing those issues and asking students what do they need in reference to, for example, a harm that has occurred to them. And so restorative justice and practices provide so many different levels of ways in which we can address harm even before a criminal act has occurred. And so I think it's critical that we look at individuals, for example, the incarcerated individuals, and provide them with means to be restored. For example, some of the work me and my colleagues that we're engaged in actually deals with providing prison education. And so now we're starting to see a shift in prison education where individuals are provided an opportunity to actually receive a college education. I know in Maryland, we're working on with Senate Bill 800, providing education to individuals in the state of Maryland through 4 HBCUs, in which Bowie State is actually included. So I think there is a shift and a recognition that in order for us to move forward as a community, we have to be intentional in the programming and the laws that we actually have.
Well, and being intentional, I want to give a shout out to United Nations, who had recently Nicole Hannah-Jones as a keynote speaker. She's the creator, for those who don't know, the few people who don't know, who was the creator of the New York Times Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times 1619 project that aimed to place the consequence of slavery in the United States and the contribution of Black Americans as a more center to the national narrative. And those issues is definitely worthy of restorative justice as we move forward in terms of even reparations, repairing the damage that has been done. Is there any mention of reparations during this conference on Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Bowie State University?
No, we don't talk about reparations during this particular conference. However, in terms of restorative justice and restorative practice, one of the areas is reparative boards. That is actually a part of restorative justice and practices, in which it involves the community in addressing the actual wrongdoing that has occurred. And so reparative boards are a part of restorative justice and practices. However, not from my knowledge, unless one of the the speakers address reparative boards in terms of victimization. But outside of that, not on a larger scale in terms of our people in receiving reparations.
All right, so there you have it. This is the Institute for Restorative Justice and Practice virtual conference, Manifesting Our Healing, Living Beyond COVID-19. It's taking place again, Friday, April the 8th, 2022, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The registration is free and attendees can continue. Ooh, I'm just noticing some more names up here of people I know. I did hear you say Reverend Tony Lee. He's one of the good guys here.
Yes.
But do you have contact information for people to register? Of course, when people watch this, there will be a link added with the program for people to click on so they can register to attend. But if you have the information before you, feel free to share before we leave here today.
Yes, and so the actual email for more information, restorative.justice@bowiestate.edu. We can send you the information that way, or you can contact me at mlharris@bowiestate.edu.
Now, this is React Radio. We do shout outs. So anything you want to that we miss, and any folks that need some shine, here's your platform to do so.
Yes, I would like to shout out the Executive Director of the Institute of Restorative Justice, that is Dr. Charles Adams. Also, our wonderful planning committee, starting with Shinzira Shamade, Miss Victoria Kelly, Janae Carpenter, and Miss Wedderburn. And I would dare not forget our illustrious president, President Amita Bro, and our provost, Dr. Carl Goodman. And thank you so much for this opportunity to express and share our conference that will occur this Friday. We appreciate this space to share this important work.
All right, and my closing comments will be, this is leaders are called upon to build new bridges, promote the common good, uplift others. Restorative justice can serve as an indispensable tool for achieving these goals. Restorative justice focuses on the interrelatedness of the human experience and offers an alternative framework for resolving conflict and the resulting harm. It seeks to address the question of how to make things right. And I want to thank you for your efforts to make things right. And I also want to end on a high note. We unfortunately we mentioned the slap that was heard around the world, but Lee Daniels and comedian, Oscar award-winning comedian Monique ended their feud, and they have been seen on stage embracing each other. And Lee Daniels apologized, and they have had a resolution to their conflict. And I think this was a great note to end on, because that was an aspect of making things right and their efforts to support restorative justice and the calls that you're putting forth and addressing in this upcoming conference. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for joining us here today. And I want to also extend an invitation, because we will be bringing the Black Love Festival in September, and I want to have you and your good energy to help us make things right, okay?
Thank you.
Stay safe, stay strong, stay woke. We Act Radio. Do something.
Thank you.